I thought class was something people could see before they heard your name. The thing is, I did not call it cruelty when my family laughed at Marek. I called it culture, history, standards. 3 champagne glasses, 1 wedding toast, and of course I smiled like a daughter who knew her place. By the next morning, everyone at that hotel knew my family had been standing on borrowed stairs. My name is Cressida Whitcomb. I was 32, and I worked as development director for a private heritage museum where old families paid to feel useful. The thing is, I knew how to make money look like virtue before the donor had finished taking off his coat. Of course, I called that polish, not hunger. 2 ledgers, 1 silver pen, no crime. That afternoon, the museum office smelled of dust, beeswax polish, and the rain coming through the old window frame. I was checking the seating plan for a donor preview when Marek arrived with coffee and a folded floor plan under his arm. He was my groom, though he still looked like a man who expected to be useful before he was welcomed. He had fixed the museum's collapsed archive system 6 months earlier, staying until 2 in the morning while I walked donors through a room and pretended nothing behind the scenes had failed. I had thanked him then. Properly, I thought. I had touched his cheek in the empty archive room and told him he had saved me. He had smiled like saving me was not extra work. That was one of the good things. Sundays were another. We used to walk through small churches and old houses outside the city. I liked the names on stone plaques. Marek liked the beams, drains, roof lines, and the way old structures carried pressure without bragging. He would tell me why one wall had survived and another had cracked. I would pretend to listen only for the architecture, though I liked his voice best when he explained things he trusted. Then my mother called. Arabella Whitcomb never wasted a greeting when worry had already entered the room. She asked whether Marek's family understood the tone of the wedding. Not the schedule, not the food, the tone. I said they would be fine. Marek looked up from the floor plan. He did not ask what she had said. He only asked softly whether something had changed between us since the engagement lunch. The thing is, a soft question can still feel like a hand closing around your wrist. I told him nothing had changed. I said weddings made everyone dramatic. Of course he nodded, because Marek's flaw was that he could turn pain into a quiet worksheet and expect me to fill in the missing line. Later, Imogen sent me a message saying the wedding would show whether Marek knew his place. I stared at it longer than I should have. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private room above a restaurant that smelled of roast lamb, candle wax, and wet wool from coats left near the door. My mother had chosen the room because the ceiling had plasterwork and because the manager knew our name without needing it spelled. The thing is, names mattered in rooms like that. They arrived before you did and stayed after you left. 2 long tables. 1 printed menu. No reason to make it heavy. Marek came in with Ania, his younger sister, who wore a dark blue dress and kept smoothing the skirt with both hands. She was 27, clever, careful, and too direct for my mother's taste. Arabella kissed the air near her cheek and said the dress was surprisingly elegant. That word, surprisingly, came wrapped in perfume. It was soft enough to deny and sharp enough to keep. Anya smiled because women like her learn quickly when a room is asking them not to react. Marek heard it. Of course he did. He always heard the thing that could later be placed neatly on the table. His eyes moved from Anya to me. Not angry. Waiting. I looked at the menu instead. Felix was already on his second drink. My brother had the kind of charm people forgave before checking the damage. He lifted his glass and told Marek that his family must be excited to see how proper weddings worked. A few people laughed because Felix made everything sound like a joke someone else had requested. I laughed too. Not much. Just enough. That was the first active choice of the night. Not the toast later. Not the wedding. That small laugh placed exactly where silence would have cost me something. Sebastian Vale arrived late with his collar open and an apology that included everybody but belonged to no one. My mother's whole face changed when she saw him. Sebastian was an old family friend. a man who knew when to touch a shoulder and when to step back. He had no real interest in me, not in the way I pretended he did. What he offered was worse. He offered the feeling that I still belonged to the people my mother wanted watching. He kissed my cheek and said the room looked very Whitcomb. I heard approval. Marek heard the same thing and probably heard the price under it. During the first course, Imogen leaned close and said Marek's mother looked terrified of the cutlery. I told her not to be awful. My mouth smiled before my words finished arriving. Imogen loved that part of me. She was my cousin, but more than that, she was the person who made my worst thoughts feel like social intelligence. She had always been near enough to the family name to want its shine, but never centered enough to own it. When I was cruel, she felt invited into the house. Anya sat across from us, her face closed by small degrees. My father spoke to Marek's mother about the estate as if he were giving a tour through a glass wall. He mentioned the orchard, the west wing, the old library, and the restoration we had been planning for years. He did not mention that half the upstairs was shut because rain came through the roof near the old nursery. He did not mention that the library shelves had been empty in places since I was 19 because private sales were quieter than public auctions. Marek's mother said the place sounded beautiful. Arabella said beauty was easier to keep when people were raised with it. The table went careful. The thing is, I knew what my mother meant. I also knew what it sounded like. Those are not the same problem when you choose which one to solve. Marek asked me after the plates were cleared if we could step into the service corridor. He did not touch my arm. He never trapped me with touch. The corridor smelled of lemon cleaner and hot plates. A server passed us carrying empty wine glasses and kept his eyes down. Marek named the exact thing. He said my mother had called Anya's dress surprisingly elegant, Felix had joked about proper weddings, and Arabella had turned his mother's life into a class lesson. He asked what I thought was happening. Specific. Factual. One named room, one named pattern. What he meant was that his family had been hurt, and he needed me to see it before it grew teeth. What I heard was that he wanted me to accuse my own family 2 nights before the wedding. I told him he was making a class war out of dinner. His face did not break. That almost made me angrier. A broken face would have given me something simple to answer. Instead, he stood there in his dark suit, calm enough to make me feel untidy. He said he was not asking me to choose poverty over privilege. He said he was asking me not to smile while people used one against the other. That sentence should have slowed me down. Instead, I told him old families spoke in strange ways and that not every edge was a knife. I said Ania looked uncomfortable because she wanted to look wronged. Of course, once I said that, I had to believe it for at least the rest of the night. When we returned, Ania was photographing the place cards near the entrance table. She said the calligraphy was beautiful. Her voice was flat enough that I should have heard warning in it. Imogen asked if Marek had given me a lecture. Sebastian looked up from his wine, interested but not involved. That was his talent. He could stand close to a fire and leave smelling clean. I said Marek was worried his family had been misunderstood. Marek looked at me then. Not long, just once. The rest of dinner continued, but the air had a new arrangement. Anya answered politely and stopped offering extra sentences. Marek's mother kept both hands in her lap between courses. Felix talked too loudly. My mother smiled at anyone who would help her pretend the room had passed. By dessert, Imogen was still laughing, but a little faster now, like she was trying to keep the old rhythm alive. Sebastian told a story about a chapel wedding in Provence, and everyone listened with relief, because nobody in the story was poor, insulted, or standing beside us. When we left, Ania kissed Marek's cheek and did not kiss mine. She said she had an early morning, that was all. Outside, the pavement shone black under the streetlights. Marek waited for the car in silence. I checked my phone and saw a new message from Imogen. She had written that if Marek was this sensitive before the wedding, I should prepare for a lifetime of translating silverware. I laughed once, then turned the screen down. Marek saw the movement. He did not ask. That silence followed us back to the hotel. The wedding ballroom smelled of white roses, old wood, and champagne that had warmed too long under lights. My mother said the flowers were nearly right, which in Arabella's language meant she was pleased enough to continue living. The room had high windows, a pale dance floor, and the Whitcomb crest printed in ivory on every place card. The thing is, a crest does not have to mean power. Sometimes it only means a family has practiced the shape of power longer than others. 200 guests. One head table. No private place for shame. Marek stood beside me during the first hour of the reception, no longer only my groom in the old sense, but still the man everyone measured against the room. He wore a black suit and the cufflinks I had given him because they were simple enough not to argue with the rest of the wedding. His mother sat 3 seats down from mine. Anya sat beside her, straight-backed, hands folded over the small purse in her lap. I saw the place card with his mother's name. White card, black script, Whitcomb crest above it. It looked harmless. Of course it did. Sebastian stood near the bar, speaking to 2 donors from the museum. He had that loose, polished ease my family understood, without instruction. Imogen kept drifting between my chair and his group, bringing back little reports like gifts. She said Sebastian had told someone I looked born for the room. She said Marek looked serious enough to audit the cake. I told her to stop. Again, too late. Again, smiling. The speeches began after the first dance. My father rose with one hand on the back of his chair. He looked silver and proud under the lights, exactly the way people expect old family men to look when their debts are not sitting beside their names. He thanked everyone for joining our families. He spoke about history, continuity, and the strange blessing of marrying across worlds. Across worlds? A few people smiled. Marek did not move. My father continued. He said Cressida had always had a generous spirit. He said she had never been afraid to open doors for people with ambition. The laugh that followed was small at first. Then Felix picked it up from the side of the head table and made it easier for others. Marek's mother looked down. I saw it. I saw the exact second her eyes left my father and landed on the ivory card before her plate. Marek's hand rested on the table. The fingers did not curl. They simply went still. Felix stood next because Felix never trusted a silence he had not created. He said Marek had upgraded from council flats to crest-marked silverware, and he hoped the shock would not affect his vows. Someone laughed near the back. Then another person. The laughter moved unevenly across the room, catching on people who did not know whether refusal would make them rude. The thing is, I told myself it was harmless because everyone knew weddings had jokes. I told myself Marek was strong enough to take it. I told myself my family was old, odd, sharp, and he had wanted to marry into all of it. That last part was the lie with the cleanest shoes. Arabella touched her glass and added not loudly that Cressida always had a kind heart for ambitious men. The guests close enough heard it. That was enough. Imogen laughed first. Felix looked pleased. Sebastian smiled down into his drink. I smiled too. Not wide, not wicked. Just the correct daughter's smile, the one that told the room the family had permission. Marek turned his head and looked at me. No anger. That would have helped me. No pleading. That would have made me powerful. His face was quiet in a way that gave me nothing to arrange. Then he reached for his mother's place card. He picked it up carefully with 2 fingers, as if the paper were damp. He folded it once. Not hard, not dramatic. Just once, along the crest. Then once more until her name disappeared inside the fold. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. The ballroom did not go silent all at once. Rooms rarely do. Silence moves through people like cold through stone. First, Ania stopped moving. Then Marek's mother put down her fork. Then Helena Price, the wedding planner near the side door, lowered her clipboard. A man from the museum board stopped smiling halfway through a breath. Even Imogen's laugh shortened and fell into her glass. For a few seconds, the room was no longer mine. That was when the door opened inside me. Not guilt. Something plainer. I saw Marek's mother sitting under my family crest after being turned into a joke by people who had never paid their own roof repair bill on time. I saw Ania's phone low in her lap from the rehearsal dinner. I saw my father talking about worlds while his own world leaned on loans, favours, and the kind of silence money buys until it cannot. Marek had not entered my family empty-handed. He had carried my career, my panic, my museum crisis, my Sunday maps. My family had not lifted him. They had stood on a stair he helped keep from breaking, then laughed at his shoes. The thought stayed for one breath. Then Sebastian laughed near the bar. It was not even a full laugh, just a small private sound, made toward Felix, almost nothing. But it reached the part of me that still needed the old world to approve my posture. I closed the door. I told myself Marek's family had decided before arriving that we would insult them. I told myself new money and old pain always searched for proof. Of course I lifted my glass. Marek did not stand. He did not correct my father. He did not rescue his mother by making the room uglier. He sat through the rest of the speeches like a man holding a glass wall in place with his bare hands. After dessert, he asked me to come to the terrace. The air outside was wet and cool. Rain had touched the stone earlier, and the roses along the wall smelled stronger than they had inside. Music came through the ballroom doors in a muffled pulse. Marek stood with his back to the garden, not looking at the view. He asked whether I had wanted a husband or a witness to my family's approval. That was the quiet debrief. No raised voice. The quiet was the point. I heard accusation because accusation gave me something to fight. I told him he was making my wedding night into a hearing. He said it was our wedding night. I said that was exactly why he should not spend it collecting injuries like receipts. He looked toward the ballroom doors. Inside, people moved under warm lights, still pretending they knew what kind of party this was. He said his mother had cleaned offices when he was a child. He said he had told me that because he trusted me not to let anyone make her ashamed of it. The thing is, he said it like a fact. Not a plea, not a wound. A fact with nowhere soft to land. I told him my father had not named his mother's work. I told him Felix was drunk. I told him Arabella said strange things when she was nervous. One excuse after another, lined up like chairs no one wanted to sit in. Marek asked if I heard myself. I said I heard him trying to punish me for being from a family that knew how to speak. His face changed then. Only by 1 inch. His mouth closed. His eyes moved past me to the doors. When we returned, Ania had changed seats. She was beside Marek's mother now, not near my side of the room. Helena watched us from the service doorway. Imogen raised her eyebrows at me from the bar, but she did not come over. Sebastian spoke to Felix with his shoulder turned halfway from me, already protecting his own outline. The dance floor filled because people prefer music to moral decisions. Near midnight, I touched Marek's sleeve and told him we had to cut the cake. He looked at my hand on the fabric, then at my face. He said he would stand where he was placed. That sentence was not loud enough for anyone else to hear. It reached me anyway. The bridal suite had cream walls, a brass mirror, and a bed covered in pillows nobody could sleep beside. Someone had left a tray with 2 untouched glasses of champagne on the small table near the window. Outside, the hotel garden lights blurred through rain. The room smelled of roses, hairspray, and fabric steamed too many times. The thing is, private rooms are cruel after public ones. They remove the music. 2 glasses, 1 folded place card. No applause left. Marek sat on the edge of the bed in his wedding suit. His jacket was open. His tie had been loosened but not removed. He looked tired in a way that made him older and less available to my explanations. I stood by the mirror and unclipped 1 earring because doing something with my hands helped me sound calm. I told him the evening had been emotional and that my family drank too much when nervous. I said Felix had gone too far and my father had chosen poor wording. It was not an apology. It was a velvet rope. Marek said it was not one toast. He said it was the engagement lunch, the rehearsal dinner, the seating notes, the way I looked away when his sister was insulted, and the way I smiled when my father called his life another world. He spoke without heat. Accumulation, not incident. He had been gathering weight while I was calling it decoration. What he meant was that I had helped every small cut become a pattern. What I heard was that he had built a case against my family inside his head while pretending to marry me. I told him he was good at making pain sound like paperwork. Of course, I said it because it was partly true. He did that. He brought timelines when I wanted feeling. He named examples when I wanted him to say he was hurt in one human sentence. His eyes lowered to the carpet. For once, he did not answer quickly. Then he said he had expected my family to be difficult. He had not expected me to help them. That was his vulnerable moment. No strategy, no threat. He looked simply sad, and because it was simple, I misread it. I told myself he wanted me to collapse into guilt. I told myself sadness was the last tool of a calm man who had run out of facts. So I changed tactic. I walked toward him and softened my voice. I said I was sorry his mother had felt uncomfortable. I said I wished he had told me sooner that he was carrying so much. I said we could speak to my family after the honeymoon, when everyone had slept and the sharpness had gone. Weaponized empathy. That is what it was, though I did not use those words then. I gave him concern that kept me above the thing I had done. Marek looked at me with a tired kind of clarity. He asked if I had just apologized for his mother's feelings instead of my family's words. The sentence had no ornament. It left me nowhere elegant to stand. I said he was twisting it. A knock came at the door before he could answer. Felix opened it after I said his name. My brother stood in the doorway with his bow tie undone and a glass of water in one hand. He looked younger without the performance, not innocent, just less protected. He said the toast looked bad. That was all. 4 words. I asked if he had come to report on my marriage or ask for more champagne. He flinched. Felix rarely flinched. He said he was only saying the room had turned. He said Anya had barely spoken after dinner and Helena had been talking to Marek near the service hall. I told him Helena was paid to worry. Felix looked at Marek, then back at me. For a second, my brother stood somewhere between us. Then he chose the hallway by leaving it. He said he would see us in the morning and closed the door softly. After that, the room had too much air. Marek reached into his jacket and took out the folded ivory place card. His mother's name was hidden inside. The Whitcomb crest showed on the outer fold, bent down the middle. He placed it on his knee and smoothed it with his thumb. I watched him photograph it. 1 picture. No comment. No threat. He put it back in his jacket. I said he was collecting emotional evidence because he liked being wounded neatly. The sentence sounded clever when it left my mouth. It died before it reached the carpet. He did not defend himself. That was new. Marek usually corrected the angle of a thing, even a sentence. This time he stood and took his phone from the table. He typed 1 message. I could see only the top line before he turned the screen away. Anya, do not delete anything. The service corridor outside our suite was quiet when I left to get air. I did not need air. I needed a different version of the room. The corridor smelled of carpet cleaner and the late food trays stacked near the lift. Imogen had texted 3 times during the argument. First, she asked if I was alive. Then she wrote that everyone drank too much. Then she sent a bride emoji without words. Her replies were smaller than usual. I called her. It rang until the voicemail tone. Of course, she was probably asleep. Of course, she had taken her makeup off and stopped wanting to be near the part of the fire that burned skin. Near the lift, Helena Price stood with her folder against her chest. She was speaking to one of the catering staff in a low voice. When she saw me, she stopped. Not dramatically. Professionally. That was worse. She asked if I needed anything. I told her no. Then I said the family speeches had got away from us. Helena looked at the closed bridal suite door and said some rooms did not get away from people. Some rooms followed instructions. I did not answer. The thing is, neutral people are only useful when they stay decorative. Helena had stopped being decorative. Back inside the suite, Marek had taken off his jacket and hung it over the chair. The place card stayed inside the pocket. He sat by the window now, shoes still on, hands clasped loosely, looking at the rain. I asked if he planned to sleep there. He said he did not know yet. I laughed once and told him not to make the wedding night into a tragic portrait. He turned his head then, not sharply, slowly, as if every movement had to pass through some private decision before reaching his body. He said I kept thinking the problem was how things looked. I told him looks were not small in my family. He said he was beginning to understand that. No anger, no raised voice, no demand, just that sentence, placed down between us like a key I did not want. Later, I slept in the bed. Marek sat in the chair until after 2. I know because I woke once and saw the blue light from his phone on his face. He was not scrolling. He was reading something still. The place card made a faint square shape in his jacket pocket. By morning, my dress hung over the wardrobe door like a costume after closing night. Marek's jacket was gone from the chair. So was he. The hotel breakfast room had glass walls and too many plants, all polished leaves and pale pots arranged to make rich people feel like nature had accepted their reservation. The air smelled of coffee, butter, and damp roses from the conservatory next door. I wore the family pearls my mother had worn at her own wedding because I needed the morning to remember what side it was on. The thing is, pearls are useful when you need softness to look inherited. 2 cups. 1 empty chair. No reason to look nervous. Marek sat with Anya near the window, not at the centre table where my mother had placed our family. His mother sat beside him, wrapped in a grey shawl. She looked rested, which annoyed me because I had slept badly and needed someone else to show it. Felix was near the buffet, speaking to nobody. My father read a newspaper he was not turning. Arabella held a coffee cup with both hands, her rings bright against the white china. Imogen was not there yet. Sebastian was, but only just. He stood near the doors, talking to a guest from the museum board, his body angled toward the exit. Agenda B had always been in him. I simply called it discretion when it flattered me. He liked the glow of my family name, not the risk of standing under it when the plaster cracked. I crossed the room and sat where people could see me. That was deliberate, not impulse. I wanted the room to understand that I had not been reduced to a woman begging at the window table. Marek looked up once. He did not come over. My mother asked if we were all going to continue pretending breakfast was comfortable. Her voice was low, but not low enough. Felix winced. My father folded the newspaper. I said some people entered old families and immediately searched for reasons to feel insulted. There it was. My voluntary line. Public, clear, and chosen. Anya's fork touched her plate with a small sound. Marek's mother looked at her hands. Marek did not blink. Marek stood slowly and came to our table. He did not bring his coffee. He did not bring Anya. That made it worse because he came empty-handed. He said he could accept not being born into my world. He said he could accept awkward rooms, old codes, and people who needed time to understand each other. He said he could not accept being used as proof that I still belonged there. That was his final clean statement. Not repeated. Not decorated. What he meant was that he was offering me the last plain line before the door shut. What I heard was that he had made himself noble and me small in front of the same people I had spent my life trying not to disappoint. So I used the one true thing I had. I told him he always made emotional pain sound like a project brief. I said he never simply hurt. He arranged hurt into facts, times, examples and questions until the person across from him felt like a faulty beam he was measuring. The room did not move. Marek did not deny it. That should have made me feel powerful. It did. for half a second. Then he said facts were the only language I did not laugh at. No one came to save me from that sentence. My mother looked into her coffee. Felix turned away from the buffet. Sebastian checked his phone. The museum board guest pretended to study the pastries. The thing is, being right about one thing gives you a dangerous little platform. I climbed onto mine and mistook it for solid ground. I said Marek's family should be grateful the wedding had given them dignity for one night. The sentence went farther than I planned. It crossed the carpet. It reached the window table. It entered Anya's face and took something from it. Marek's mother closed her eyes. Not long. 1 second. Enough. Marek looked at me as if I had put down an object he could finally name. He buttoned his jacket. No speech. No visible anger. The quiet was more frightening than any raised voice. He looked at my mother, then my father, then Felix, then me. He said he would handle the rest properly. Properly. That word should have sounded safe. It did not. It sounded like doors being locked from the other side. I told him not to use that tone with me. He did not answer. I told him he was making everyone uncomfortable. He still did not answer. His silence had become logistical. Mine was becoming loud. Imogen finally texted back while Marek walked toward Anya's table. I had sent her 3 messages already. One asking where she was. One asking whether Sebastian had said anything. One saying this breakfast had become absurd. She reacted to the last message with a grey thumbs up. That was all. One little hand. No words. The person who had fed every sharp part of me had found a smaller place to stand. I placed the phone screen down, but the table had already seen me looking for someone who was not coming. Arabella leaned toward me and said I had gone too far. My mother said this softly, almost under her breath, which made it sound less like concern and more like damage control. I asked if she was worried about Marek's feelings or the guest from the museum board. She did not answer fast enough. Felix came to the table with a plate he had not filled. He said, "Cressida, leave it now." Not loudly, not kindly, just tired. I told him he had enjoyed the jokes last night. He said he had been drunk and cruel, and that did not make me clean. That was Felix leaving me without leaving the room. Sebastian approached then, finally, but not close enough to be counted. He asked if everything was under control. His eyes were on the room, not on me. I said Marek was trying to punish my family because he felt inferior. Sebastian nodded in a way that did not agree, only recorded. He said mornings after weddings were always strange. Always strange. That was his help. Marek returned to the window table and spoke quietly to Anya. She took out her phone. His mother put one hand over his for a second and then removed it. The gesture was small, but the meaning was not. They were no longer asking my family for entry into anything. The breakfast room continued functioning with terrible normality. Coffee was poured. Pastries were replaced. A child from one of the guest families dropped a spoon, and someone laughed too loudly near the doors. The hotel staff moved around us with faces trained not to know. I needed the room back. So I stood. I said Marek was turning a few family jokes into a performance because he could not stand being reminded that marriage did not erase background. I said my family had welcomed him. I said nobody had forced him to marry me under the Whitcomb crest. Marek did not look up. That was the first time I understood, though I did not admit it, that he was no longer arguing with me. He was waiting for something already in motion. Anya looked at her phone. Then she looked at Helena Price, who had just entered the breakfast room carrying a slim folder. Helena paused by the host's stand, saw Marek, and then looked at me. Neutral people should not have that much weight in their eyes. I asked Marek what he had done. He stood again. This time he did not come to my table. He only picked up his mother's coat from the back of her chair and helped her into it. He said nothing. The silence was the answer, and the room finally understood, before I did. The hotel conservatory brunch had been arranged beside tall windows, fogged at the corners from the rain outside. Ferns stood in black pots between the tables, and the linen smelled faintly of starch. I was still wearing the pearls when the courier came through the glass doors and asked for Cressida Whitcomb Nowak. My married name sounded strange in his mouth. He held a cream envelope with a solicitor's stamp and a clipboard. I signed because everyone was watching and because refusing would have looked common. My hand pressed too hard and the pen left a dot of ink beside my name. Then I carried the envelope to the nearest table and opened it with a butter knife because no one gave me proper scissors. Inside was a petition for annulment with temporary financial restraining orders. The first erections hearing was listed for June 18th. Attached to it were Marek's sworn declaration, screenshots from the Whitcomb family group chat, a transcript from the wedding video, and financial exhibits tied to estate debts, donor loans, and transfers my family had dressed as restoration support. The thing is, paper is polite until it starts naming things. 2 signatures, 1 court date, no family crest large enough to cover it. My mother stood behind my chair and did not touch me. Felix read 1 page over my shoulder and then stepped back like the paper had heat. Helena Price stood near the host table with her folder against her chest. I said Marek was retaliating because he could not handle marrying up. Helena said she had heard the rehearsal dinner comments and seen the seating notes. She said some rooms followed instructions. Not cruel, not kind, just true. Sebastian left before dessert. He told a guest near the doors that he had only attended as an old family friend and had no idea the Whitcomb finances were that unstable. After that, the days became smaller. I moved into a room at the estate where the upstairs corridor was closed because rain came through near the nursery ceiling. My personal account stayed under restriction until the hearing reviewed wedding gifts, deposits, and family transfers. Felix stopped answering. Anya blocked me, and Imogen never came to the estate. Sebastian sent 1 formal message saying he hoped I found privacy during a difficult time. The museum board placed me on leave after donors asked why our family debts had appeared in a court exhibit. The thing is, I believed the family name was a wall. Of course I did. I had been raised to touch the stone and call it safety, even when water came through the roof and bills hid in drawers. I used that wall to push Marek out. Then the wall stayed standing, and he was gone. The ivory place card with the Whitcomb crest stayed inside the court exhibit folder. The crest was still beautiful after everyone knew it was paper.